Sorry, bear with Chair. Sorry, Chair, just only started going live now.
All right, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. I would remind again members to mute their microphones at all times unless they are speaking, and please only use the chat function for MIS, i.e. may I speak, and not other comments or discussions. I believe Councillor Wood is in the waiting room. Can we get him in, Mike?
He's been let in, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go with the roll call. Joe, can you call out councillor names to confirm that they are present and note any apologies, please?
Yes, thank you. Rob Appleyard.
Present.
Tim Ball.
Present.
Sarah Bevan.
Present.
Colin Blackburn.
Present.
Alison Bourne.
Present.
Shelley Bromley.
Present.
Neil Butters.
Present.
Vic Clark.
Present.
Sue Craig.
Present.
Paul Crossley. Councillor Crossley. Okay. Jerry Curran.
Present.
Chris Dando.
Present.
Jess David.
Present.
Tom Davis.
Present.
Sally Davis.
Present.
Doug Deacon.
Present.
Winston Duguid.
Present.
Mark Elliott.
Present.
Michael Evans.
Present.
Been notified that Councillor Andrew Furrs will try to join later, has some work commitments. Kevin Guy.
Present.
Alan Hale.
Present.
Liz Hardman.
Present.
Steve Hedges. Now I think Steve might be late. Steve, are you here? Okay, I think Steve's going to be joining a little bit later. Joel Hurst.
Present.
Lucy Hodge.
Present.
Duncan Hounsell.
Present.
Sean Hughes.
Present.
Eleanor Jackson. Councillor Jackson. Okay, I have seen you there, but we'll hope you'll rejoin. Grant Johnson.
Oh, sorry, I'm here. Yep.
Dr. Kumar.
Good evening.
Al McPhee.
Present.
Ruth Malloy.
Present. Hello.
Paul May.
Present. Thank you.
Matt McCabe.
Present.
Sarah Moore. Sarah, are you there? Okay, hopefully will join us in a moment. Robin Moss.
Present.
Present.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, and Robin, thank you. Paul Myers.
Present.
Lisa O'Brien.
Present.
I've had apologies from Michelle O'Doherty. She has business away. Barrett Pancania.
He sends his apologies. He'll
Thank
join
you.
in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. June Player.
Present.
Vic Pritchard.
Present.
Manda Rigby.
Present.
Dina Romero.
Present.
I've been notified that Councillor Mark Roper will be joining a little bit later on. Richard Samuel.
Present.
Bruce Shern.
Present.
Brian Simmons.
Present.
Alistair Singleton.
Present.
Sean Stevenson McGall.
Present.
Andy Waite.
Present.
Karen Walker.
Present.
Sarah Warren.
Present.
Karen Warrington.
Present.
Chris Watt.
Present.
Thank you. Ryan Wills.
Present.
David Wood.
Present, although having internet issues at the moment.
Okay. Joanna Wright.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And yes,
Paul Cross-
Councillor Jackson is here.
Right.
I am here.
Okay.
And Councillor Crossley joined after you've gone past my name.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Joe, do we
Yes,
have?
Chair.
Sorry, yes, yeah, thank you. Yes, I do. I've been emailed as we speak, but let me just read out the ones that I have. Yes, a declaration from Councillor Alistair Singleton is a non-pecuniary interest in item 9, the climate emergency item, as he's member of Bath and West Community Energy and trustee of their charitable fund and a director of Keynsham Community Energy. And also I've had a declaration of interest from Councillor Robin Moss regarding one of the statement from Councillor Hounsell at the end of the meeting, as he has an Airbnb. Thank you. And I think that is all, unless anybody else wants to flag up another one.
Okay, Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm an employee of HCRG, previously Virgin Care. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest, please? And bear in mind, please, councillors, that I can only see one of 3 screens at any one time. So a third of you will have to, as I say, rely on the chat to speak. Right, we have to note and recommend for approval the minutes of the last meeting, which will be taken to formal live council tomorrow. There is no vote on that, and unless there is anyone who has a significant discrepancy to register, we will note them and move forward. Thank you. Right, I will just make a formal announcement. Due to the desire to retain a level of social distancing after restrictions have lifted, we are continuing to hold this informal virtual council meeting to enable all councillors to take part. The comments and indicative decisions from this meeting will help inform the physically reduced quorate decision-making meeting tomorrow on the 25th of March 2022 at 11 AM at the Guildhall. We will review this approach for any future council meetings in line with government and health guidance at that time. Agenda item 6, I invite Councillor Guy, who wishes to make a statement about the current NHS pressures, which I believe has been endorsed by council leaders that he should make this statement. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a statement about the very troubling situation which our local health and social care system finds itself today. I am writing to the Secretary of State to express my concerns, and I wish to share those concerns with the Council today. Over the last 2 years, we've become used to the quite exceptional dedication and commitment of our NHS and social care staff as they have managed massive pressures to cope with the challenges brought by the COVID pandemic. In the face of unprecedented demands, regularly putting their own health and lives at risk, they have delivered incredible outcomes, and I know that we will share a huge admiration and gratitude for their work. It can be easy to forget that there were times, particularly early on, when it looked as if the entire system was going to be overwhelmed, and when all that stood between us and the worst were these amazing people. As the severity of the pandemic has lessened, as the latest COVID statistics are no longer headline news and the government restrictions and guidance have melted away, it can be tempting to think that the NHS is back to business as usual and all is well. I can confirm to the Council, Madam Chair, it is not. I learned this week of deeply unsettling case of a 93-year-old resident who fell at a church on Sunday evening, fracturing his femur. It took almost 6 minutes for the 999 call to be answered, and almost 12 hours for the ambulance to arrive. Due to his injury, the gentleman could not be moved, so he spent the night on the church floor, accompanied by his elderly wife and the vicar. Discussions over the last few days have revealed to me that this sort of event is all too common in the recent months. Despite the very best efforts of staff across the system to deliver a level of care they joined the service to provide, the RUH is under tremendous pressure and has had to declare critical incidents several times in recent months. Last Monday, 26% of its beds, that's 111 in total, were occupied by people who were medically fit to be discharged, but could not be released due to shortfalls in capacity in domiciliary care. In addition to this, the hospital had 44 COVID patients, with 7 in intensive care, and over 90 further beds unavailable due to COVID infection controls, and with staff absence for COVID infections on the rise as well. This all has a direct knock-on effect to ambulance services, and it's not unusual to see 15 to 20 ambulances queuing outside A&E, unable to hand over patients to hospital staff on account of shortages of beds and other capacity issues within the hospital. This in turn has a knock-on effect for ambulances being able to respond to 999 emergencies. In short, Council, the system is in crisis and has suffered long-term from funding deficiencies, staff shortages, particularly now that many European employees have left the UK and regular reorganisations have gone wrong. This has undermined the resilience, and that in turn has led to shortages such as items of PPE. Colleagues, the situation that faces our local services is outrageous and unacceptable for a country like ours in 2022. Our dedicated NHS and care service staff deserve so much better, and I ask you to join me in paying them the credit they deserve for their commitment in seeking to ensure that they receive the proper reassurances and support for the future. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Okay, we now move forward to agenda item 7, items from the public. Before we invite the first person to speak, I would just make the following statement. Earlier this week, the Chief Executive reminded group leaders of the wording of Rule 34 in terms of submissions of petitions, statements and deputations by members of the public and councillors, which at the bottom of the first paragraph says all items must be submitted in writing. Officers are now applying this rule. Thank you. Now we call the first speaker, Rachel Stokes, who will be speaking about the Wells Way. Ms. Stokes, please.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rachel Stokes. I represent the Keynsham Road Safety Campaign. I hope you can all hear me. Our petition calls for an extension of the proposed 30 miles per hour section of the Wells Way up to the Keynsham sign and the installation of a pavement to connect properties at Uplands with the pavement at Courtney Road. If you're not familiar with Wells Way, it is the only one of 5 major routes into Keynsham that is not currently 30 miles per hour. The section we are concerned with is only 700 metres long, but contains a very dangerous blind bend with 11 residential properties to either side of the road. Reducing the speed limit from 40 to 30 on this section would vastly increase the safety of all road users, but would only add 13 seconds to each journey. The Highways Department claim that this section should remain 40 because it is rural. If Uplands is rural, why do we pay a precept to Keynsham Town Council of around £100 per year? And although there is no up-to-date information, a traffic study of 2018 found of this rural road found that it was used by around 11,000 vehicles a day. One small field separates the Uplands residential area from the rest of Keynsham. Highways officers have been using the guidance for rural speed management when considering this road, but the official designation given by the Office for National Statistics for the section of road is C1 urban, city and town. The guidance for C1 urban, city and town speed limits is very clear. It says that 30 miles per hour is the standard speed limit for urban areas. The guidance says for a 40 miles per hour limit to be appropriate, the road must be of good width with buildings set back from the road. At the Uplands Junction, there is a building less than 150 centimetres from the road. The guidance says for roads to be suitable for 40 miles per hour,
1 minute remaining.
they must cater for the needs of non-motorised road users. Cyclists have no provision made for them, and it's only a matter of time before we see another serious incident. There are no adequate footways and crossing places. The Highways Department claim there is limited activity, but we have 50 residents who have to pull out onto this blind bend and hope for the best, as well as the 11,000 vehicles that use the road every single day. Despite our repeated requests for visits, the decision makers haven't visited the road. Their decisions have not been made based on data on composition of road users, average speeds or accidents, but the 700 people who have signed our petition see the road all the time and know it's extremely fast, it's extremely busy, it's extremely dangerous. 2 years ago, 53 of your constituents voted unanimously for this section to be reduced from 40 to 30. Now, nearly 700 of your constituents have said the same thing. How long can the council, for the sake of 700 metres, for the sake of only 13 seconds, ignore the legitimate concerns of these constituents and the evidence presented by this campaign? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Stokes. We now move to factual questions by leaders, and I would remind all group leaders that they must be factual. Councillor Guy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms Stokes. I really appreciate the petition and thank you for bringing it to council, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Yes, can I refer to Councillor Alan Hale, please?
Councillor Hale.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for the petition. Can I ask, have you actually requested the council to put in a speed count so that it can support your efforts with factual numbers? Because I know where you live and it is significantly dangerous, I imagine, to come out from your house. So it would be worthwhile getting that speed reading. Have you done that?
I have, yes, I requested that via Council Connect, I think almost probably a year ago, and I have made that request of the Highways Department since then, but nothing's been done so far.
Okay, I would suggest you carry on doing it. Can I ask whether you've actually had a response from the executive member that I believe you wrote to?
Sorry, who would that be? Which?
Councillor Rigby.
Not specifically, I haven't had a response from Councillor Rigby, but my neighbours have, and I've heard news via Andy Waite, via our local Lib Dem councillors.
And am I right in believing with the recent development of the Uplands farm into what appears to be holiday cottages, there is probably a significant increase in the amount of traffic going in and out?
Sorry, that's asking for an opinion. I can't allow that. Thank you, Councillor Hale. Councillor Walker.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you for your statement and submitting the petition. And I do hopefully you're successful in getting what you need, because it is a very busy road there, but no factual questions.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Moss.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for your statement. No factual questions, but good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Please, when you finish, would you like to rejoin on YouTube? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, right, we now come to the second statement by Mr. Goodman. Mr. Bob Goodman, please.
Hello, thank you very much. This speech will be substantially different to that I intended to deliver, and wish to put on record that this speech has been censored. It has been almost 7 years today that my mum died. I remember it not only for that reason, but the way that events changed my life. In the evening of that day, I was asked for the third time if I would stand for the Coombe ward as a councillor. I had a few weeks before said no. I had no political ambition whatsoever and believed that local government should have no politics within it. But with the loss of my mum, I was being told by her, yes, by her, from looking down from above, saying, don't be silly, Robert, you must be for because you care too much about the city. And then my venture began. How absolutely shameful it is that I find myself having to come to this council meeting to defend free speech, being dictated to by this administration and the chief executive, that I will not be allowed to speak unless I send in what I'm about to say. The leadership does not believe in transparency. I have already had to resign as a trustee of Avon Wildlife Trust because I dared to criticise this administration on their appalling response to both the climate and ecological emergency. And we have also seen the responses of other councillors when they have stood up and be counted. Councillor Wright and Kumar have to be congratulated for standing up for democracy against the severe pressure from this council. One has to ask what this Liberal Democrat council are worried about. In all my speeches to council or cabinet, I have told it as it is, but clearly they cannot defend the indefensible. I have been truly amazed at the response that I have had from residents
1 minute remaining
who feel poorly represented and from councillors, and yes, even those in the Liberal Democrat councillors here tonight, has been truly astonishing. We can see what a dictatorship can do within the destruction of the Ukraine. Those Ukrainians are truly amazing and far braver than I am. But I can do my bit standing up for democracy in the face of bullying tactics. The residents of Bath will not tolerate the way this council is behaving. If it is not the betrayal of Twyford Fields, the pressure put on planning officers by cabinet members, the debacle over mountain bikes at Entry Hill, the way in which they are allowing their development company to go unchallenged, and now to prevent free speech, it is beyond belief. If this administration think they're going to prevent me speaking the truth on the shortcomings of this council, they are sadly mistaken. I hope councillors of this meeting will take on board what is happening to the council and ignore party politics.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Guy, do you have any factual questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do have one factual question. Obviously, liking the council to Putin is particularly risky ground, but we'll ignore that. Mr. Goodman, you submitted your speech in writing. Please tell us if that speech has been censored in any way, or you are just able to deliver it verbatim as
it has been censored. It has been censored.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Yes, thank you for your speech, Bob, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Bob, for your speech. I don't believe there's any foul play in stopping anybody from having a freedom of speech, and no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Moss, please.
Hi, Bob. Are you aware that not all group leaders agree with this current change from custom and practice in allowing people to speak without a written statement? And certainly I do not. Are you aware that I don't agree with dusting off a long underused rule to change custom and practice?
I'm going to stop.
Yes, I am. That is absolutely. I understand factually that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. We move now on to David Redgewell, please. David Redgewell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to raise tonight, as I put in my statement very clearly, the issue of the buses and where we are at the position with the Department for Transport and Baroness Fear as we speak this evening. We gained an extra £150 million across England for bus service improvement grants to be carried on until October as bus service recovery grant as part of that process. We still haven't had the full recovery grant, and we still haven't had the full bus service improvement grant determined by the department, by the minister, for the bus service improvement plan and enhanced quality partnership with WECA and North Somerset Council. That's still to come. On the bus services themselves, we're about to see more reductions on the 24th of April. There'll be service reductions in the city itself on the services 1, the 5, the 3, the D2 on a Saturday to Frome, and also on some of the overnight buses and early morning buses between Bristol and Bath, which will start from Newton St Low, which is close to the depot, but obviously no good if you live in the city centre. The Mayor continues to raise the issue. We had a very packed bus forum. Heaven Guard Police Note was socially distanced in Polton Rugby Glove, which was attended by Baines and WECA and North Somerset officers. Lots of questions about reliability and punctuality. Lots of questions around the reliability and punctuality of the 178 bus between Radstock and Westfield and Midsummer Norton, Polton and Keynsham and Bristol. And that was being picked up by the Mayor. There is some service cuts. He's tendered the 92, which for Paul in the Whitchurch area is the bus that runs around the back of the estate on the Bristol boundary. That should hopefully be replaced, but at the moment that estate behind Mags Lane will actually have no bus service if there's not a new provider provided on the 24th of April. It will also be much more difficult to get to the North Fringe and to Yate and Thornbury because the 19 will still run from Bath as far as Down End and Cribbs Causeway, but the connectivity to Yate and onwards to Thornbury will be lost. So my point really is we still need to keep pushing very hard on the bus services. We need to get passengers back on the buses in Bath. We need to get those buses cleaned. We need to get them more marketing in particular, and we really need to move forward. We're also faced with a series of railway cuts coming in May when the Brighton to Great Malvern service will be withdrawn, and that goes via Bath and Keynsham. So it's a very difficult situation for public transport. I urge the council to work with WECA and North Somerset to make sure we promote as much bus service as possible. If we're going to make a climate emergency, we've got to have public transport that works. And one final point, please don't award a park and ride contract in the evenings when we could use the existing service buses to Polton, Radstock, Midsummer Norton to serve the park and ride and save ourselves £700,000 of taxpayers' money, which can be invested in local bus service in Bath and North East Somerset and the WECA area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edgewell. David, I think we would appreciate, we received your statement, but you have covered a number of areas which were not in your statement. So could I ask you please to tailor it more closely to what you actually deliver? Okay, Councillor Guy, factual questions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, David Panormal, for all your sensible comments, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, thank you for your address, David, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, David, for your statement, and thank you for campaigning for better bus and train service across our WECA region, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
Hi, David. Thank you for your normal factual and useful statements presented in the way that you have done for the 32 years that I've known you. I hope the new regulations don't stop you from giving the information in the way that you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Okay, and finally we move to Danielle Selwood. Selwood, please. Ms. Selwood.
Hi,
yes,
thank you very much for having me. Yes.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. So I'm representing BERA, Bathwick Estate Residents Association. About a third of our estate has the river as its boundary, and that's what I wish to discuss tonight. We're aware of many issues regarding the river, but I particularly would like to focus on the severe bank erosion that we have. And this is the section between Pulteney Weir and Pulteney Weir, Pulteney Bridge and Bathampton Weir. I live on the bank at Forester Court. We have a large section of bank, and I'm also a river user, a canoeist and a swimmer. So I've seen firsthand the extreme river bank erosion that we have all the way up the river, not just on our section. One of the things I'd like to point out that most people think that a lot of the erosion is being caused by increased flooding, lots of rainfall. But actually for us on this section of the river, we are on the inside of the bend, which means that we shouldn't really be at risk of flood water creating severe bank erosion. The situation we have is that many overhanging trees are being undercut by river levels in the summer. So they're undercut very low. So where the river is much lower in the summer, that is where the erosion is happening, and it's undercutting many of our trees. And at a rough guess, I would say there's about 70% of trees along this section are at risk of falling into the river over the next few years. And particularly on our section that I can speak of directly, over the 3 years that I've lived here, we have noticed that we have lost large chunks of bank, and if some of our trees actually go into the river, we're going to lose, several feet of our bank, which then is obviously going to have a massive effect on our boundary walls. As I said, this isn't just affecting us, it's affecting many of the properties along the river. A lot of this is being caused by more commercial vehicles, barges going to the Cleveland pools, safety boats for the bridge that's being worked on, and the tour boats operating longer hours and a longer season. We're also very concerned that with the opening of the Cleveland pools, this is going to become a greater problem, because I know one of their main sources of access is via the river, which means there's going to be even more river traffic going up and down. It's not only obviously a problem for us as residents, it's also a problem for biodiversity and the nature along the riverbank. A lot of it is getting washed away and the habitats are being taken with it. We're calling for this stretch of the river to be protected and reassessed. We know it's been assessed in the 80s. We know it was assessed in 2000s. We know that there has been concern during this whole time, which is over 30 years.
Time is up.
And we would ask now for a reassessment of the state of this river. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. Councillor Guy, any factual questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to defer my factual question to Councillor Wrigley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming, Danielle.
Thank you.
Are you aware that there was a voluntary code of conduct developed in the 1990s for the local boat operators, particularly on this stretch of the river? Would you support this being reviewed to see how relevant it still is and then discussed with all partners?
Yes, definitely. I wasn't aware of that. I know that various studies have been done and I know a speed limit has been put in, but I didn't know that there was a voluntary code, and I think that is very, very necessary. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Yes, thank you, Danielle. Danielle, would you be in favour of limiting the commercial use of the river on that particular stretch that you're identifying?
I think so. I think what we would very much like is limited numbers and limited time as well. So we're talking about several parts of the year, of several months of the year, sorry, where there is no traffic at all. So the river has got time to recover and repair. I think restricted boats is very important, especially not just for erosion, but also for the safety of the growing numbers of leisure users. There are many swimmers, paddleboarders, canoeists. It's increasingly being used for leisure activities. And I think we need to look at it as a whole, especially now that the National Trust are going to be granting more access to the river, which is a great thing, by taking over of the Bathampton Meadows. So we can.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Danielle, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
Thank you for the statement, Danielle, but no factual questions.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Danielle.
That's okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to agenda item 8, Aqueous Government Structure and Business Plan. At this stage, I would remind members that there is an exempt appendix. If any councillor wishes to discuss that specific appendix and the detail of that specific appendix, a resolution will need to be passed to move into exempt session. Can I have indication in the chat if there is anyone who wishes to move a motion to that effect? No, fine, thank you. So can I ask Councillor Davis, I'm sorry, to move the motion, please?
Madam Chair, sorry, just before we start on that last point, can I understand if I'm making reference in my speech to a particular item in the business plan, we need to move to an exempt
If
session?
there is, you are using confidential information, yes, you do need to move to a private session. Do you wish to move that?
No, I will exempt. I won't make reference to particular properties in the business plan. That's fine. I can
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The paper in front of us this evening covers a number of aspects relating to the Aquis group of companies, and I'm happy to be proposing this paper. Before I do so, I'd like to note that going forward, we want to be sure that the timetable and process around the review and approval of future business plans is adjusted to ensure that it receives the review of the corporate PDS. And I'm sorry that the timetable this year did not provide for that. It is right that after 5 years of operation, thought is given to some aspects of the governance of the companies. Specifically tonight, in relation to the governance arrangements, we are being asked to accept the changes detailed in the reserved matter schedule in Appendix 3 and highlighted by the asterisks therein, which will avoid duplication of approval requirements on some matters where these have previously been approved by council as part of the approval of the business plan. In addition to reviewing the governance in light of operating experience, this paper also details proposed changes to the corporate structure of the group, which will better reflect the operational activities of the companies within the group, will help it address the constraints noted specifically in paragraph 7.1 of the report, and ultimately will better enable it to meet the objectives detailed in the business plan, including its ability to ensure that dividends can be returned to the council. In summary, these changes see the creation of a new holding company, Aquis Holding Limited, which will now hold the shares of both Aquis Construction Limited and Aquis Developments Limited. The appropriate legal and financial advice has been obtained in proposing this simple restructure, and I would stress that the council's oversight in all aspects of the governance and operations for the companies will remain unchanged, with the current ADL board taking on the board roles for the holding company and Constructions Limited, all under the control of the council. The paper outlines the details of the necessary steps which will be taken to implement this restructure, and these are detailed in paragraphs 7.1 to 7.9, which will now be delegated to the council's section 151 officer to implement. We're also asked tonight to note the 2020-21 accounts for both Aquis Developments Limited and Aquis Construction Limited, and I would draw councillors' particular attention to the activities of Aquis Construction Limited and its results, which reflect the particular success of the Riverside View development. And finally, I'd like to end on a positive forward-looking note and reflect briefly on the business plan for 2021-2024, which we're being asked to approve. Specifically, I would note that the company's core aims and the fundamental congruence they have with the council's own work and aspirations. In my role as the Cabinet Member for Council House Building, I note the invaluable work Aquis is already doing and will continue to do in supporting the delivery of the first council houses for social rent in a generation and the council's first shared ownership properties. I also note what the business plan lays out for the developments which are being progressed to repurpose and better utilise the council's own commercial and corporate estate for the benefit of us all. And the fact that these programmes are all being delivered in a way which directly supports the council's commitment under our climate and ecological emergency, whilst continuing to ensure that the group meets its financial objectives for a financial return to the council of at least £1 million per year, which the council is then able to invest directly in the delivery of our key services. This is set to be a very exciting next stage of the group's operations, with all of us, our local residents and the community as a whole, the direct beneficiaries of the Aquis Group's work. And so on that note, Chair, I'd like to move this paper and propose the recommendations noted in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.5 of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Can I ask Councillor Samuel to second it, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Council will know in seconding this that we have been undertaking a huge amount of work over the last 18 months to overhaul the Council's corporate property estate. And part of that overhaul includes redefining and improving the relationship with ADL-ACL in terms of the repurposing of properties which require new use for the future. And progress on that quite lengthy corporate project has been regularly reported to the corporate policy panel. So this report is really a tidying up exercise, as Councillor Davis has said, bringing a lot of things together into one report. But the thing I would just remind members of before I conclude is ADL was set up to make return for the council, whether capital returns or dividend payments, and that supports the services we do. It is clear to me, having been in this role now for around 3 years, that that relationship was a good, sound relationship, but the systems the council had set in place did require some improvement, and that is exactly what we've done. So I second this report, and it would be interesting to hear members' comments on it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Okay, I have Councillor May to speak, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Conservative Group wish to vote against the recommendations for the following reasons. When the council-owned company was set up under TECAL rules, its primary aim was to develop commercial flats over commercial properties owned by the local authority. The world is changing. The government has since reassessed its approach to such companies, borrowing large sums for commercial undertakings, and the local government financial body, CIPFA, is currently reassessing the guidance for such companies. The report directly allows ADL company to repurpose the Baines commercial estate and now occupies offices within the Guildhall. This may not fall within these new rules, reborrowing, and raises questions re the costs of rental space, independence of council IT systems, and other management of long-standing and valued council staff. The report in item 2.3 of the recommendation delegates the whole of section 7 to the section 151 officer to implement, including shareholders' approvals of all financial, legal and corporate documentation. This removes the normal council scrutiny role. In a report that is 113 pages long, there are accounts for 2021 related to ADL, ACL, which we are asked to note, but have not been to the council's own audit committee, and clearly a council meeting is not able in detail to scrutinise these reports anyway. Even worse, the council is being asked to approve the forward business plan for the company, which contains exempt information, but clearly ought to be scrutinised properly to see if the current and proposed rules for tech-owl companies are being adhered to, such as trading outside of the Baines area and engagement.
1 minute remaining.
Creating a holding company directly creates an extra tier of bureaucracy, and if ADL and ACL are set up separately, there will be questions re separating finance, HR, legal, leases, and management costs. As a council-owned company, the risks, losses, pensions, and redundancies are the liability of the public funding from our council taxpayers. The proposed business plan the council is being asked to approve has had no scrutiny, as Councillor Davies has said, really complex figures of profits and loss, marketplaces, sites in the pipeline, and net capital and revenue profits. For these reasons, the democratic scrutiny, the public expect cannot be achieved by the Conservative group, reluctantly must vote against these recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the recommendation before us tonight, I would like to make a few observations. Points 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 are valid structural changes, and I can understand why these need to be put in place. It's unfortunate that we've been operating these entities for 5 years and it has taken us this long to pick up on basic business practices. Further proof really that running a council and running a business might seem similar, but have fundamental differences and they're better off not mixed. Point 2.4 is asking us to note the accounts. They've not gone through scrutiny and I believe we should not be being asked to note them without guidance from our peers as to the validity of the numbers contained. A simple glance by those less familiar with accounts and balance sheets might conclude ADL looks a healthy enterprise, but I can assure you that it is not business practice to misrepresent your figures to try and cover the facts. If you look at page 66, the bottom line should tell you the total assets less liabilities, and this should show the business in a minus position of circa £149,000, not leaving a reader believing that it's an 8 million plus business. I'm confident the scrutiny will pick these up and recommend restating the accounts. Point 2.5, we've got 52 properties that are now under rental management and 12 of these which we bought off ourselves at Keynsham Riverside. How many of those other 40 have actually been repurposed from our estate in the last 5 years? We don't know, and no one ever seems to tell us. And this was the reason for setting up the company in the first place. That's a pretty poor return for 5 years' work on the ADL core reason for being. Increased social housing is a very laudable aim of this council, but by sticking to the use of our own property company as the delivery partner, we are not gaining best value. Our funds are being used to prop up an organisation top-heavy with director costs who have no liability for failure. 117 Newbridge Hill could have been retained in the council,
1 minute remaining,
tenders issued, and we would have spent £1 million converting our own building into 7 social housing units. Instead, we're paying 2.1 million, and even after taking off the 300 grand we got from ADL to buy the site, we're paying 800,000 more than we need to. And that's a shocking waste to prop up ADL, and that's money lost from allowing us to build more social housing. I will summarise that it's clear that the directors want to distance themselves from the prospect of failure by putting the onus on the council to continue to feed them with opportunities. The things they want to focus on appear to take them into full development territory with South Gloucestershire Council and also focusing their eyes on Bath West and Riverside. This seems a mile away from what they were set up to do, and even as the focus has now shifted to building our much needed social housing, this seems to pale compared to what they want to do. After 5 years, I still struggle to see the reasons for these entities to exist when we could do all the functions in-house.
You're 3 minutes left.
I cannot support what has been brought forward tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a very simple question. I'm just looking for some clarification. Looking at the accounts, for ACL, we're seeing directors' remuneration at £325,000 and the ADL accounts showing directors' remuneration at £300,000. So are we actually saying that the total director's remuneration is now £625,000? Because that seems like quite a significant increase. And I think it's particularly poignant at a time where our own staff are seeing just a 2% salary increase. Thank you.
Right. I'm sure that Councillor Davis can respond to that in his summing up. Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Labour Group will be supporting this report because many councils up and down the country are having to look at different and innovative ways to develop housing, social housing, and also raise income to support council services. But I do want to look particularly at paragraph 6, which is the governance arrangements. I also want to echo the points made by Colin that Colin Blackburn, that running a business is in many ways different to running a council. And I think it's important from the points that have been raised about the governance, about what's actually happening within the company, that the review by corporate audit and that scrutiny, corporate policy scrutiny, should be looking at the activities and being able to comment. I'd also add on to that the informal arrangements are that before any major decisions, that group leaders talk with the leader of council about those and discuss those. And while I appreciate those are informal arrangements, I'd hope we can have some clarification or some confirmation that those arrangements will continue. There are always difficult questions when you're looking at effectively a development company, and I think it's important that what actually happens and any changes are scrutinised.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Are there any other speakers on this topic, please? No, I now call on Councillor Davis to sum up, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your comments on this. As I said at the start of my speech, looking forward and going forward, it's important that we reflect and learn on the timetable of how this progressed this time, to ensure that going forward, future business plans, as I said, and other matters go to scrutiny where appropriate. I remain assured by council officers that the operating structure of the properties of the companies remains compliant. And I think what I would reflect upon from some of the comments we've heard today is that by diversifying the operations of these companies and widening their aims, we are directly benefiting all of the meeting the objectives of the council as a whole and the needs of our residents. And for that reason, I'm delighted to move this paper and would urge you all where possible to support it.
Thank you. I am assuming, Councillor Davis, that you will respond separately to Councillor Hughes and his direct question.
Beg your pardon, Madam Chair. Is that was in relation to the remuneration? Ultimately, remuneration for these companies sits as the responsibility of the directors of the individual companies. So if you don't mind, I think I'll leave it more appropriate if I leave them to respond on that matter.
Okay, thank you. Right, we now move to the vote, and as we are practiced to do, assuming that the majority is going to vote along with this, the proposer, can I have any votes against the motion, please? Is that everyone? Has everyone voted as they choose to? And can you not use the yellow hands, please? Can you use the chat? Otherwise, it's difficult for Joe to record. So can you put your yellow hands down and use the chat, please? Have you seen your name in the chat? Okay, do you have those, Joe? Do you have those?
Yes, I do, sorry, there's another one just coming in there. Hang on, sorry, people are voting. This is just a vote for against. So I can see people are voting in a different way. So I'm just trying to count the votes against. I think I have 16 votes against. 16. Yeah, okay. I have 16 votes against.
Thank you. Anyone who wishes to abstain?
I already have the vote recorded from Councillor Bevan to abstain. So anybody else?
Okay, so there are 16 against, did you say? And 1 abstention. The report is therefore approved. Thank you. Agenda item 9, we move to the Climate Emergency Annual Report. Can I ask Councillor Warren to move this, please? Councillor Warren.
Thanks, Chair. I'm very pleased to present to you this evening this second annual report on progress against the Council's Climate Emergency Declaration. In a year in which COVID has continued to impact the Council's activities through reduced income, as well as staff sickness and turnover, we have made steady progress against one of our 2 core policies, tackling the climate and ecological emergencies. This weekend, in an extraordinary weather event, exceptionally warm conditions were experienced at the Earth's 2 poles. Concordia Station in the Antarctic was some 40 degrees above the seasonal norm, while stations near the North Pole recorded temperatures 30 degrees above normal. This is just the most recent in a catalogue of extreme weather events which accelerated through 2021, the 6th warmest year on record. Also, over the last year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has published 2 reports, which are ever more definitive about the seriousness of the impacts on humanity of the climate crisis, described as Code Red for Humanity, and demanding an immediate response across all areas of society. The reports reinforce the importance of our local 2030 deadline for net zero. In November, the UK hosted the COP26 conference in Glasgow, where some progress was made, but not nearly enough, and where David Attenborough expressed his desperate hope that we might still avoid disaster, whilst the Prime Minister gave a rousing, humorous speech before flying home by private jet. Our national government has sadly not grasped the seriousness of the challenge we face, still set on a 2050 trajectory for net zero against all scientific evidence, and is currently being taken to court by Client Earth, a group campaigning to protect life on Earth over its inadequate net zero strategy. This Council's achievements in this context, in which we lack many of the relevant powers, are inadequately supported by a government that does not take the crisis seriously, and in which our budgets have been severely impacted by austerity and then COVID, are all the more noteworthy, and I thank officers for their hard work and dedication. Councillors, the report before you is full of detail about the numerous ways in which we have shown leadership in this area. For instance, with our new procurement and commissioning strategy. Over the last year, we've made great strides in boosting the green transformation team who lead much of this work, and in rolling out training around the organisation to all other staff groups. We facilitated community engagement through our first climate festival last autumn, and have made steady progress to prepare the ground for delivery in our priority areas of transport, energy and energy efficient buildings. This evening, at a time of energy crisis and the worst squeeze on household incomes in 50 years, I wanted to highlight the Council's activities supporting energy efficiency in homes. The Council's development company ADL is currently completing construction of 9 low energy family homes at Sladebrook Road, whilst the Council itself is on track to complete energy efficient retrofit and conversion to supported housing of the Grade 1 listed Grosvenor House, involving roof insulation and installation of solar panels, achieving an astonishing 40% reduction in carbon emissions. Meanwhile, the Council's housing teams run what is known as the LAD2 programme to help improve the comfort, conditions and energy performance of households on lower incomes, living in homes with poorer energy efficiency ratings. I'm pleased to report that £421,000 has been invested to date. And in addition to energy efficiency measures like insulation, rooftop solar panels are also being installed. As you've heard, we are keen in veins to do our bit supporting householders with lower energy bills at this difficult time, but lack the necessary freedoms in this complex field. This is why we were so disappointed at the Chancellor's missed opportunity in his spring statement, where he lavished tax cuts on those on middle and higher incomes, whilst leaving 48% of children in homes where sacrifices must to cover essentials. He could instead have invested in this area. Creation of a national retrofit task force combined with strengthened building regulations and £11 billion spent on home insulation and heat pumps would have done much to tackle both the climate and the cost of living crises in one go. Councillors, I'm proud of the commitment shown across all political parties in Bath and North East Somerset to our climate and ecological emergency commitments, and of the leadership that we are showing as a council in this area. I ask you to note the action we are taking across all areas of council activity and commend the paper to you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Bourne, please, to second.
Thank you. We are currently facing many threats and challenges, and the biggest threat of all is that of climate change. Local authorities have limited powers, but we do have influence. So the decision to declare a climate emergency back in 2019 was important, and it was notable that it had cross-party support. It is essential that we all do everything in our power to help prevent and mitigate the effects of climate change. This report shows that despite those limited powers, Bath and North East Somerset has demonstrated considerable leadership in this sphere and has made substantial progress. I'm particularly pleased to note the investment in additional posts that have been created to continue to drive this work forward and to ensure that we accelerate progress across all areas. Achievements of particular note include, firstly, the significant reductions in carbon emissions from council-owned buildings, including most recently the retrofitting of our nursing home in Keynsham, which includes the replacement of gas-fired boilers with air source heat pumps, the fitting of solar panels, and a switch to LED lighting. We plan to continue this programme across other buildings in our care sector. Secondly, the partial update of the local plan and the retrofitting and sustainable construction SPD are significant and will support reductions in carbon emissions from buildings across Bath and North East Somerset, both new build and retrofitted, publicly and privately owned. We have also made significant improvements to our recycling rates and reduced our use of landfill. In addition, we have made significant progress in tree planting to help mitigate both the climate and ecological emergencies. The Lincoln Hill Fields Partnership in my ward is a particularly good example where the council has supported the community to plant tiny forests that act as carbon sinks and to take many other measures that achieve net biodiversity gain while also increasing public access to the site. The progress we have made to reduce the negative impact of traffic on our day-to-day lives by improving air quality and by encouraging more sustainable transport alternatives is also of note. Much more is needed in this area, but we have a solid foundation to build on. Lastly, I would like to note the work that's been done to raise awareness of the climate and ecological emergencies through training, seminars, webinars, and the successful Climate and Biodiversity Festival held last autumn. This has encouraged participation across our communities and plays an important role in supporting and encouraging us all to make the lifestyle changes that are needed. There is no room for complacency, and there is much more to be done. We have ambitious plans for the coming years, and our partnership with WECA is important.
Your time is up.
I commend Councillor Warren's leadership in this area and the breadth of progress that's been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. I have Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is yet another disappointing report in what has been a long 3 years of disappointment for our climate emergency declaration. No matter how often the administration praises itself or tries to sugarcoat awful decision-making, the fact remains that there has been very little in the way of meaningful action undertaken, and it has all been far too slow. As far as I can see, the Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan doesn't actually offer anything in the way of action at all. Action is measurable, and yet all we have so far received is report after report after report. Emergencies need to be responded to immediately. as Councillor Guy made clear in his statement earlier on a different subject matter. But this administration is taking so long to achieve anything that the words written in these reports are meaningless without the urgent action required to back them up. The Conservative government is already displaying how ill-equipped and unprepared it is to deal with the climate emergency, and therefore we need local councils like Baines to step up to the task. The Metro Mayor of the West of England, Dan Norris, is already displaying what leadership on climate change looks like. But sadly, I fear this administration is running rapidly out of time. The Labour group will be supporting this report, but once again, and I stress again, I ask that you put some urgency into this climate emergency and produce an action plan that is both time-bound and measurable. Only then will we know that this administration practices what it preaches.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Singleton, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I welcome this report and note the significant progress it outlines in the Council's continuing commitment to meet our ambitious but vital net zero by 2030 goal. It details the huge amount of work achieved by many people in different parts of the Council over the last year. But the stars of the show, as ever, are the sustainability team, who once again have excelled in the face of huge challenges. The Baines community are enormously lucky to have them. Tonight, I want to talk primarily about energy. Current geopolitical events make it clearer than ever that a rapid move to energy security and independence are critical to our future. For us locally, the debate centres on renewables. The report before us tonight tells of sound progress over the last year. Bath Quays South fitted with the largest solar array in Bath, installations on care homes and other council assets underway or planned, new schools projects, partnerships with local community energy groups, the Solar Together initiative, which has attracted over 1,500 expressions of interest, and much, much more in the pipeline. But we are at a critical point of inflection as the need for rapid progress ratchets up. Whilst there are a number in government who see this as a money-making opportunity to revisit fracking or to drill for ever more elusive and expensive oil and gas in the North Sea, the weight of advice to government is to loosen the moratorium on onshore wind, and their own climate change committee has advised that solar must almost triple by 2030. Much of that will be on roofs and brownfield development, but the great majority must perforce come from solar farms. Both wind and solar farms can be controversial. Indeed, the latter were described just this month by a member of the Planning Committee as blots on the landscape. For wind, we must remember that just 200 years ago, Bath was surrounded by
1 minute remaining.
Somerset liberally dotted with windmills. They were an essential source of power to the food and farming industries, and their time will come again. The countryside is not set in aspect. It does not stand still. And solar farms are beset by mythology and misinformation. The NPPF already steers them to lower grade land, and the government's own 2020 biodiversity strategy describes the synergies to be had between solar and biodiversity net gain. Universities research suggests that insects, birds, plant life, and pollinators all benefit from well-managed solar farms, and it is generally recognized that a farm with a well-managed biodiversity plan should return the land to agriculture use after the 25-year life of the project with better soil quality and richer biodiversity. In short, it's a win-win. So, in summary, all credit for all that has been achieved in the last year and barely repressed anticipation for all that will come.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singleton. Councillor May, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Conservative group supported both the climate emergency and the ecological emergency. So I want to bring some balance to the discussions. I think it's unfortunate that you pulled in national politics into this item because it is so important. But I do think it is really leaving yourself quite vulnerable in reporting what you're doing, because it's nice to see what you're doing, and therefore there's going to be complaints and compliments along the way. But I want to stand back from this report and just say, what's the impact on residents of this area? Because I think if you stand back, there's a lot of the talk about the national politics and the elements about ecology and climate. But when you actually go through some of the things that you've listed, the SPD is absolutely brilliant to do that, particularly with regards to buildings that need improvement if those are listed buildings. But are we going to help the poor owners of those buildings in practical ways? Are we going to be helping general house owners around local insulation? Are we going to be putting some match funding into PVs for residents? And have you delivered the PVs on the Keynsham development, which we've heard a lot about tonight from ADL? And are we getting rid of diesel vehicles in our own fleet? The ecological emergency is more about the locality of issues, and I think that I would like to see more about that in the future if we can. And finally, you've mentioned about the clean air zone. Have we achieved the 40 ppm in Bath that we all signed up to? That's my points. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor David, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to welcome this report and the detailed annex that accompanies it, setting out the actions that have been taken so far. But I wanted to comment particularly tonight about our work in response to the ecological emergency, which we declared in July 2020. Clearly, the last 18 months has been a very challenging time, with COVID-19 placing an unprecedented strain on our staff. But I am really proud of the progress that the Council has made during this time. In particular, under Sarah's leadership, we've created a new green infrastructure and nature recovery team, which will lead our work on biodiversity net gain and also on a new local nature recovery strategy. Bringing our officers together in this new team will allow them to pool their expertise on biodiversity and green infrastructure and put us ahead in our approach to implementing biodiversity net gain, as well as the new nature recovery strategy. During the next year, this team will develop an ecological emergency action plan, which will set out how we can become nature positive by 2030. And alongside this strategic work, we are also making great strides in our operational work. We have reviewed the maintenance regime for all of our parks and green spaces so that we can manage these better for wildlife as part of our Let's Get Buzzing campaign. 20% of our grassland is left to grow long and is cut now either once or twice a year. We're introducing neighbourhood nature areas where residents can take on small areas of green spaces to manage better for nature. And we have supported community wildflower planting and bulb projects across Bath and North East Somerset, working directly with community groups and also through the Your Parks initiative. And finally, we've planted thousands of trees as part of the Baines Tree and Woodland Delivery Plan, and we've worked with hundreds of residents across the council area as well as with local partners. And I'd like to commend all the officers that have been involved in leading this work, and I look forward to much more progress in the year to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Hurst, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to also congratulate the authors of this report, the officers and the Cabinet for driving forward this extraordinary important agenda in an even more extraordinary times. And none of us need to be reminded about the challenges of the last couple of years in terms of the focus of the activities of the council have been somewhat distracted. I particularly want to welcome some of the key actions that are set out in the report, the tree planting, which we've seen across the authority, and I've noticed in my ward, the recycling achievements, which are significant, and now Baines is fourth in the country, I think, for our recycling rates, the implementation of the clean air zone and the procurement strategy. There were two things I wanted to particularly focus on and join the calls, but maybe in a slightly more critical friend manner than some of the other comments about trying to go further and faster, because we do need to go further and faster. The first area I want to focus on is renewable energy. So Friends of the Earth have currently estimated that Baines Authority could be generating renewable energy by a factor of 10 in terms of our opportunity to kind of step that up. Currently, the UK generates about half of its electricity from renewables, but only if we as a council are play our important role in allocating land can we help contribute to that, help contribute to the much more in sharp focus fuel security issues that are arising. So we need to focus on this area as we move forward, develop our capacity. And I note that also Friends of the Earth in their recent public opinion survey in Baines are saying that 66% of residents would support the development of a wind turbine in their area close to their home. So we need to look at that.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The second area I wanted to focus on very quickly in 1 minute was about the ecological emergency. One of our areas, the South Stoke Odd Down Plateau, is under threat from development, and I would urge the council to look specifically at the challenges around the greater horseshoe bat, the nesting sites for skylarks, both protected species. This area is under threat and we need to do more to protect it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hadn't intended to speak. I have not submitted my speech in advance, but I feel I must respond to some of the things that have already been said in the debate. First of all, I'd like to endorse absolutely everything that Councillor Johnson said. I feel also that this report could have been better, could have been more precise, and that it should have set definite benchmarks and much more concrete goals that the council is aiming to achieve. I don't think criticising the national government at this level, at this stage, is very appropriate. But what I would like to say is that it's really important to begin at the level of every single resident. There was a famous Chinese evangelist before the war who taught his ecumenical friends to pray, "Lord, revive thy church, beginning with me." It's that beginning with me that's so important, that we should each take responsibility. I'm very proud of the fact that Westfield Parish Council, when we had to remove an avenue of mature trees because they had ash dieback, have planted trees nearby which will of a different species. And I would like to know not just how many trees the council is going to plant, but how many it's had to remove and whether these are being replaced by an alternative species. We need to have the complete balance sheet, I think, and at the moment this report doesn't really give it to us, but I'm really hopeful that every individual resident will take up the challenge. We've just now got an electric charging point installed in the middle of Radstock. This is the way forward, but if we don't have electric charging points installed in council car parks, we're not going to get very far on the green agenda. So thank you very much indeed for the report, but we could do better.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Warrington, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to again express my disappointment in the report. I know that people have worked hard. I know that there has been a pandemic, but when the previous administration declared the climate emergency in 2019, it was an emergency, and it was noted that 2015 was too late and that 2030 was the target date to get to net zero. So again, I would like to come back to the objectives, and we need some smart objectives. And as previous speakers have said, they must be measurable. We also in this, we need to congratulate our residents for their engagement and their actions. I know from my own experience that True Magna PC was one of the first declaring a climate emergency, and they've been very hands-on and very active and proactive. And we also have a valley-wide climate emergency and nature emergency working group that are very practical and offering advice to a wide range of individuals. I'd like to just bring your attention to the last report, but it is reflected in this particular report as well. But one of our worst carbon emissions is not actually transport at less than a third, but it's more our buildings and our residences. So our domestic, if you look at the the graph in the area-wide carbon emissions by sector, domestic is one of the highest. And so we need to do more to encourage domestic reduction emissions. I also agree that we do need to look at our energy and we need to have more sustainable energy here, but we need to be very innovative. Solar panels, I have no objection.
1 minute remaining.
Solar panels, thank you. But a word of warning, we have a devastating war in Ukraine, which is absolutely appalling for Ukrainians, and we will come on to that. But this will have a huge impact on access to food across Europe. I implore you again not to accept large solar farms that will take out farmland for 25 years or more. Concentrate on smaller solar farms, commercial buildings, domestic homes, so that we can use regenerative farming techniques to produce sustainable food and in quantities to feed this area and locality and beyond. And let's not rely on exports of food that we can grow here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Councillor Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let's remind ourselves of the desperate situation that is taking place on planet Earth today. Antarctica is 70 degrees Fahrenheit above average. The Arctic is 50 degrees Fahrenheit above average. This warming has smashed records and shocked scientists. Science has repeatedly warned us of this tipping point. 3 years ago, this council declared a climate emergency. The report before us appears to show that very little has been done in the last year. Much of the publicity by the Lib Dem administration has focused on 66% emission reductions on Baines council buildings. As council buildings are only 1% of the total number of buildings in this district, the actual figure is 66% of 1%. Now, I'm not the best at maths, but even I can work out that is not very much. The report further states that the council's approach to tackling the climate emergency is to discuss the issues at a senior level, informed by specialist consultants who have been paid to gather data, collect evidence and research, and then submit a report. It is quite clear that for the last 3 years, there has been much talking and writing reports by consultants, followed by more talking and writing reports. This council does not need another report on what the problem is. It has wasted 3 years in measuring data on what is clearly a well-known documented subject. Every one of us knows that the world is on fire and we have to use less coal, oil and petrol in our homes, in our work environments, in how we move around, and in how our food is produced. We know that many families are struggling to heat homes. So where is the workable programme to inform and help people insulate cold, damp homes? Without being a well-educated, wealthy person, there is little, if any, information on how to tackle fuel poverty in Baines. We know that many families are paying record prices at petrol stations because the option to use public transport or cycle are either more expensive or too dangerous. The action this council could already have in place have been stopped by the leadership team. A bus gate on North Road would have provided a safe cycling route from Bath Valley Floor to the plateau where thousands of students live and study, where there are schools and services to be accessed. The carbon emission saving this would have made is enormous and would have improved the finances and the health of many. Yet this action has been purposely delayed because this administration is more concerned with local votes than the climate emergency or public health. Even the Climate Emergency and Sustainability Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel has failed to deliver robust and frank conversations. The Lib Dem administration has instructed all committee members on this scrutiny panel to send in 2 questions in advance of any meeting. If this administration is so committed to getting to net zero, wouldn't it be welcoming every question, every suggestion, every conversation? Wouldn't it want a Green Party member on its panel? This report fails to show any leadership or way forward, and in a year's time, the effects of the polar melting, I fear, will be felt by all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, as Grant Johnson said, the Labour Group will be supporting this report. We actually think the ambition and the scale that is outlined and has been outlined for a few years has been admirable. But our problem is, and I think it's by many councillors here, is actually how do you measure that delivery? What's actually happening in practice? And that's difficult, because I know that Richard Samuel a couple of years ago was talking about how, as a council, we needed to have targets and benchmarks, and that was across the piece, not just necessarily on the climate emergency. And while recognise and welcome the element within the report 3.2 that's talking about how Audit West will be producing a report later this year, that still doesn't give us any objective measures of where we actually are. But of course, there was an audit that was taken place, an analysis taken place, and came out towards the end of January this year. That was undertaken by Climate Emergency UK, the not-for-profit campaigning organisation. And it looked at the 409 local authorities across the UK, and remind us, of course, that all local authorities have struggled with COVID and the effects of COVID. So this is actually a peer review in similar situation. And what they did, what Climate Emergency UK did, is they scored 325 plans that the local authorities had, and they grouped questions into 9 categories, which look particularly at how well councils' plans would mitigate the impact of climate change locally, whether that climate and ecological was integrated into existing policies, their community engagements, their climate education, their scale of emissions targets, and commitment to tackle the ecological emergency. Baines scored 50%, 50 out of 100, and was about 170 odd out of 400, which is, to say the least, disappointing, which is I think the word of the evening. And our local peers, Wiltshire got 81%, South Gloucester got 80%, Mendip got 71%, Bristol got 64%, even Somerset, which is being abolished, managed to get 63%. So I think, to quote Eleanor, really need to do better, really need to have measurements in place so that we can see that a plan that all of us want to see succeeding actually succeeds. And at the moment, I'm afraid it's not going as well as it should do.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Samuel, please.
I think members of the council are being a bit hard on themselves. When the report, when the climate emergency was declared a few years ago, it was very clear that the council could not do everything within its boundaries to achieve the rate of change needed. We were very clear at the time that the council had a community leadership role in showing the possibilities to residents. And what is brilliant about this is that so many residents have taken up this challenge in all sorts of different ways. I can't let this go without reminding the council that we will lose £83 million from our income between 2020 and 25. And there are 2 things that are necessary to make climate action effective at a local level. The first of those is money. If you have no money to do things, you cannot effect change well. And that is afraid the blunt reality for this council, as with many others at the moment. The second is the power to do things. Governments have to grant local councils the powers to intervene, to make changes. So I hear a number of members talking about how we can insulate the domestic housing stock. Well, we can't do that without money or power, and those have not been granted to councils. So that's the reality. In the transport sector, it's slightly different. There are powers available to councils, but my God, it's a hard battle winning the public's confidence that carbon emissions are necessary in the transport sector, but they are improving. So I think members of this council are being far too hard on what has been done. It was never promised that Bath North East Somerset Council would solve the climate emergency within Bath North East Somerset. Our role is
1 minute remains.
Thank you. Our role is to lead the community, show them the way, show them the possibilities, and when there are opportunities to improve carbon reduction, then obviously we will take them. But I come back to those central points. To do an effective job, you need money and power, and neither of those have been granted to this council or any other. And that's the blunt truth.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Councillor Kumar, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope I can speak without providing the written statement in advance. It is damaging to see the self-congratulatory speeches, although I thoroughly and completely support both the ecological and climate emergency, which was introduced in Bath in 2019. There is a clear-cut emergency to protect our Mother Earth. There is a clear-cut urgency to protect our country, our county, our city, and our community. For me, the community first. But what we are delivering, it is extremely sad to see so much of pollution in my ward, particularly on Bathwick Street. I won't go into the fiasco of what happened with Cleveland Bridge. But if you live on Bathwick Street, perhaps your lifespan will go down by at least 2 years. Are we really taking it seriously? Really? No, Chair. If we did, this report would have been not lacking with tangible figures. It lacks. There's hardly much
1
data.
minute remains.
However, in our city, we've got beautiful and excellent institute. University of Bath, where I work, has also talked about or has implemented climate emergency. The university recognizes the clear-cut scientific evidence and the need for urgent action across the society to tackle dangerous anthropogenic, I repeat, anthropogenic climate change and its impact on the humanity and biodiversity. Are we consulting university and academicians there, not only for climate change, not only for environment, but for other matters as well?
Your time is up.
I have myself given so many names, but it was never heard. Thank you. My time is up.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Pritchard, please. After Councillor Pritchard, I have got Councillor Walker and Councillor McCabe, and I am calling a draw under that. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I was interested to listen to Councillor Sarah Warren taking us around the world to emphasise the ecological and climate change emergency. I didn't really think we needed that. I would have preferred that she spent more time dedicated to being explicit on what this administration is doing to alleviate the problems of climate change. And then Councillor Grant Johnson went to denigrate so many aspects of the paper, which I was inclined to agree with him, but he then advocates that he's going to support something that he denigrates. Most of the paper is dedicated to different strategies and strategies upon strategies that really amount to nothing. It's just a governance structure. And then it was saying, somebody enthusiastically said, oh, we're going to get some more additional posts, and then we're going to do some more seminars and coming along. It's all meaningless. You couldn't get the public at large to be more enthusiastic about wanting to do something. They definitely want to engage in it. And this is what the council should be doing, is encouraging those individuals to engage in it. Councillor Singleton turns around and says, advocates covering all of the agricultural land with solar panels. Solar farms, a great enthusiast of it. But that's there using up, absolutely, it's a criminal action to use up grade 1 listed agricultural land that will never return. Once in 25 years, you've got a different generation that will have seen nothing other than the solar panels and will think nothing of returning it to its original state.
1 minute remaining.
I've seen absolutely nothing in these papers that involves one of our key partners, the RUH, which does have its own climate strategies, but surprisingly, we have no idea what they might be. Now, the NHS emits 5.4% of the UK's annual greenhouse gas emissions, and that's equivalent to all the outward bound flights from Heathrow over the same period. It may surprise you to know that when surgical patients breathe in anaesthetics, they metabolize less than 5% of the anaesthetic gas. 95% is exhaled, mostly unchanged, and pumped out into out of the building into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas emission. There are systems available to address this. They're currently piloted in Newcastle, Devon, Exeter, the Royal Devon and Exeter, and
your time is up, Councillor.
The RUH should follow suit, and so I hope that the administration engage with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really wanted to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Wright mentioned in her remarks. She mentioned that the Climate Emergency Sustainable Panel only allows 2 questions to be submitted. This is not the fact. You can submit as many questions as you want. It's 2 questions actually at the meeting, so we can keep our meetings to a nice timely order when we've got such a big agenda. Councillor Wright is always welcome to attend one of our meetings, even submit questions if she wishes as well. So I just really wanted to raise those things with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And finally, Councillor McCabe, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Samuels mentioned money and power, and I want to add to that resources, because the staff, the council has been pretty gutted of staff in recent years as a matter of policy to reduce costs, and so we have a balance to strike. Officers available to answer questions, to write reports and produce shiny plans so that we can appear higher up league tables, or we can direct our officers to the task in hand. So I would like to welcome this increase in staffing, and I look forward to working with them, especially around EV charging or food resilience or delivering on our extremely cutting-edge planning policies, and also delivering with our key partners and delivering walking and cycling infrastructure for our residents who can choose to use other options than drive. And I would like to say that together with our residents, we will be ramping up our fight against climate change, and I look forward to being part of that and part of an exciting future. And I look forward to putting in infrastructure in all the towns as well as Bath in North East Somerset.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I now return to Councillor Warren to sum up, please.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for their comments this evening. I also want to particularly thank the parishes, community groups and local residents who've shown such commitment alongside this council in taking actions of their own. And I will just draw your attention quickly to our recently published retrofit supplementary planning document that contains a section on actions for quick wins that residents can take. My comments about the government are not party political point scoring, but an honest appraisal based on real experience of battling a system created by this government, which is stacked in so many ways against effective action on the climate emergency. I must say I am intrigued to be lectured this week of all weeks on the importance of local and low intensity farming by the Conservatives who have publicly opposed such a development in my ward, and to be lectured on the climate emergency by someone opposed to solar panels. It is worth noting that our climate emergency action plan is currently being benchmarked against those of other councils by Audit West. So we shall soon hear from an independent and knowledgeable source on how it stacks up compared to our peers. Some have highlighted that there is much more still to do in Bath and North East Somerset to tackle the climate emergency. I agree with you all. No council could ever do enough. And we all, as a civilization, as a country, and yes, as an authority, have a long way to go. I agree that we need further action on renewables, and with the changes we have brought in through the local plan partial update, this will be made easier. And the same is true in many other areas. We've been preparing the ground to make further action easier from here. Finally, I want to particularly thank officers who, if they have listened to the debate this evening, may feel unappreciated, as I know how exceptionally knowledgeable they are and how exceptionally hard they have worked. I propose on that note to that we move to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Okay, so first of all, we'll record votes against acceptance of this report. Can I have any votes against, please? Okay, thank you. Votes to abstain, please. All right, Joe, do you have those?
Yep, still a couple coming in, but so far I'm recording, oh, hang on. Okay, I'm recording 8 abstentions and there were 2 votes against.
Any more votes wishing to be recorded? No,
Yep,
thank you.
8
Thank you.
abstentions, 2 against. Thank you.
Thank you. The vote is carried. We move to agenda item 10. Appointment of independent person and independent member. Can I call on Councillor Guy to move this, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And due to the long nature of the recent debate on item number 9, I will curtail my speech slightly for the benefit of the Council. It is extremely important that we have impartial individuals when it comes to scrutiny, so I welcome the appointment of the independent person and the independent member, and I move the recommendations as stated in the papers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guy, for being so succinct. Can I have a seconder, please, in Councillor Moss?
And I hope I'll be even sharper than Lisa. Echo the points that are made by Kevin. It's important that we have independent people to scrutinise how we work as councillors. More than happy to second this report.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that there's precious little information in what's presented to us to give us an indication that an appropriate process has been followed through this appointment. Indeed, the reverse is the case, as the CV presented to us is for a gentleman that has a 5-year gap in his CV in the recent history. It runs the fellow up to the age of around about his late 60s, 70s, and then there's 5 years missing from his CV. And one has to ask the question, what sort of process did we go to or go through that that didn't uncover what might have been going on in the last 5 years for somebody who was already past a normal retirement age. Our group leader sought some assurances from senior officers and was told that that was okay, or it was all right, because they know them and they know that they've been working with some sort of association or union for chief executives, which doesn't really fill me with any great confidence that that the process is perhaps lacking such diligence that a candidate gets through with a 5-year hole in their CV, and that said that that's okay because they're known to a senior officer and in the authority. Feels to me as though it treats us with at best indifference and at worst some level of contempt, that we have this put under our nose without a complete set of information about the chosen candidate, and with no information about the process or the other people that might have been available. So I'm left in a position where I don't feel as though this candidate for this post is going to be starting off on the right foot, given the complete lack of information about the continuity of their career and what they've been doing in the last 5 years. And I think it's disappointing that this person who is sitting judgment over us starts off in this way.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Do I have anyone else who wishes to speak, please? No, I return to Councillor Guy to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Watt, for your comments. This is clearly a fully independent appointment, so I can't comment on the points that you've made, and I'm happy to move straight to the vote, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. So first of all, can we have any votes against this appointment, these appointments? Do we have abstentions? I see we have 1, 2. Any further abstentions? No, the motion, the appointment is carried. Thank you. We now move to the next agenda item 11, councillor attendance, the 6-month rule dispensation. Can I move to ask Councillor Guy to move? And councillors will be aware that he will be moving a bigger proposal than was officially recorded in the public papers. So can I ask Councillor Guy to read out the second part, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, you preempted exactly what I was about to do there. As per the papers, and there's an additional 2.2 section which I'll read to the council now. To agree that in light of these meetings being conducted through the contingency arrangements, meaning most of these members planning to attend a physical meeting are now unable to do so, a dispensation is issued for all councillors unable to attend a physical meeting for a further period of 3 months from this meeting, further to section 85.1 of the Local Government Act 1972 until the 24th of June 2022. And that is an additional section of 2.2, Madam Chair. And therefore I move the recommendations as in the papers with that additional comment attached.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. I call on Councillor Pritchard to second, please. Before we do that, can I just note from Joe that Councillor Hale needed to also recorded an against.
Sorry, shall I just jump in? Sorry. Yeah, I need to just update that another name of a councillor is to be added for the appendix for the dispensation in category 2.1, and that is Councillor Alan Hale. So just to add that, so when you're moving and seconding and voting, he's also included in those councillors listed in appendix 1. Thank you.
Fine, thank you very
Happy
much.
to move that as stated, Madam Chair, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, would you second this? I think you will go to second it.
Yes, pleased to be able to second it soon.
Okay, thank you. So we move straight to the vote. Is there anyone against this? Can you please note down in chat? Is there anyone who wishes to abstain? No, the vote is carried. Thank you. We then move to agenda item 12, the announcement of the chairman and vice chairman designate for the year 2022-2023. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and I will hold back my thanks and congratulations to yourself until the formal AGM, Madam Chair. But I am happy to move this announcement that Councillor Sean McGall, your trusted deputy, will be the nomination for chair in the May AGM. He has done an outstanding job in his role as vice chair, and I was happy to meet him at the train station once, where we put some reeves on the train and sent them off to London for Remembrance Day, and that was a really good event. So I look forward to him being the chair, and I'm happy to move this announcement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Walker, please.
So I'm happy to second the recommendation to name Councillor Sean Stevenson McGaw as chair designate for 22-23. Over 22 years, Sean has served residents from Oakville Park, students of Bath College and Bath University. Sean will be a great advocate for Bath and North East Somerset Council. Again, happy to second that recommendation. And also, I believe we need to move the vice chair designates as well. Councillor Guy.
Yes, happy to move Councillor Player as the vice chair designate. I believe that's correct, Councillor Warren. And I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Lovely, thank you. So again, I'm happy to second the recommendation to name Councillor Player as vice chair designate for 22-23. I met June when I first became an independent councillor in 2015. I've always found June to be very enthusiastic, positive, and do whatever she can for her residents in Westmoreland, and is truly a minded community councillor. So I'm just happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, do you wish to sum up, please, or move straight to the vote?
Happy to move straight to the vote, Madam Chairman, and I will save my congratulating speeches to the AGM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Can we have any votes against these recommendations? Any abstentions? No, then congratulations to Councillor McGall and Councillor Player as designates for next year. Right, we have done brilliantly, undoubtedly due to Councillor Guy's succinctness. It is now 2024, so we are ahead of time. I therefore propose we have a comfort break. Can I ask you to turn off your camera and your microphone? We will have 10 minutes and we will resume at 10:40 precisely. Thank you.
Sorry, but she said 10:40.
I think it's 8:40. I think we can confirm it's 8:40. Okay.
Yeah, and she said 10 minutes, but it should be then 8:35 rather than 8:45.
Chair.
Right, it is 8:40. I'm ready to start again. Okay, thank you for being so prompt. Right, agenda item 13, cleaning up our rivers, motion from the Liberal Democrat Party. Councillor Jess David, please, to move. Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to introduce this motion on the urgent need to clean up our rivers. This is a national and global problem. We are collectively allowing the destruction of these precious natural habitats, the very features around which our settlements were first established. Pollution from the sewage system has been a hot topic in recent months, and quite rightly so, but we must be clear that this is not the only cause of local pollution. Farming and runoff from roads and other hard surfaces are also major sources, and we are all responsible for what we flush away or pour down our drains. The government aims to ensure that all water bodies in England meet good ecological status by 2027. However, something is going badly wrong because every river in England is now polluted beyond legal limits. Locally, just 12% of the Bristol Avon catchment is classified as being of good ecological status, with the main sources of pollution being treated sewage and diffuse pollution from farming and land management. People are rightly outraged that sewage is discharged directly into rivers, and the Rivers Trust has produced an excellent online map which shows the location of all effluent discharges into the river system, and there are over 70 sites in Bath City alone. This includes both overflows of untreated sewage that occur when the combined sewer system becomes overloaded, for example, following heavy rainfall, and also the continuous discharge of treated sewage, which is the main factor in local pollution. To tackle both issues, we need to see major investment by the water industry, not just in traditional sewage infrastructure, but also in new and nature-based solutions for water treatment, such as constructed wetlands, which can provide a lower carbon solution to water treatment, but also innovative systems for monitoring the capacity of sewers and identifying blockages. To quote the recent House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee report, which I would encourage others to read, there are no quick fixes to decades of underinvestment in the sewerage network in England. Successive administrations, water companies and regulators have grown complacent and have appeared resigned to maintaining the antiquated practice of dumping sewage in rivers. We must all do better. Not all homes in Baines are currently connected to the sewage system or even to private sewers, and some properties discharge waste into uncompliant wetlands. This urgently needs to change, soakaways. This urgently needs to change, and we must work with parishes and water companies to ensure that the right solutions are in place. As with many complex problems, the answer to cleaning up our rivers will lie in partnership work, and Bath and North East Somerset Council is a member of the Bristol Avon Catchment Partnership, which includes Wessex Water, the Environment Agency and also Wiltshire Council, and provides a route to engaging with landowners along the river. The government must also urgently raise its ambition, and I am pleased to see that DEFRA is currently seeking views on the first set of targets to underpin the Environment Act. This includes targets to reduce the two principal sources of nutrient pollution in rivers, aim to reduce pollution from agriculture by at least 40% by 2037, and from treated wastewater by 80% by 2037. These proposals are very welcome, but alongside this, we need to step up proactive and positive work to improve the ecological quality of our rivers. So this motion is intended to set out the range of actions that we can do in Bath and North East Somerset to drive the changes needed. Firstly, it calls on government to restore funding to the Environment Agency, noting that the agency, this regulator, has lost 2/3 of its budget since 2010 and simply does not have the capacity necessary to regulate effectively. Secondly, to increase funding for catchment partnerships so that they can do more to engage with all local partners along the river, including farm owners and landowners, and to support them to achieve the actions needed. And thirdly, to strengthen the legal obligations and powers available to water companies. And one example that Wessex Water gave me was that they have no legal power at the moment to discharge rainwater straight into the river, which means it has to go into the sewer system and be treated as sewage. Also, there are complementary measures to reduce load on the sewage system. Firstly, to ban the sale of non-degradable and plastic-containing wet wipes, which are the major causes of blockages in the sewage system. And based on water company data, around 40% of pollution incidents
1 minute remains.
Blockages, and 60% of these incidents were caused by wet wipes. To introduce incentives for the introduction of sustainable drainage systems, which can also help to manage more of the rainwater outside of the sewage system. This should be both for new build as well as for existing properties. And then there are also actions we can take directly as a council. We need to think about the impacts that our buildings, our homes and businesses have on the water environment in terms of runoff. Every hard and non-permeable surface contributes to pollution, and this motion commits us as a council to explore how we can reduce this urban creep in the local plan. We can also share information about the actions needed to clean up our rivers, and I believe there's an important role for our scrutiny boards here. And finally, we can work with communities to prevent plastics and other waste from entering the water. This Saturday, on the 26th of March, No Place for Litter and Bains are organising the first ever Great Avon River Clean, which will mobilise litter groups from Keynsham to Midford. So I encourage all colleagues to join this effort to clean up our river, as well as to support this motion and send a clear message to government to demand greater action to restore the ecological quality of our river.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Hodge, I believe, is going to second this. Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Chair. I have no hesitation in seconding this excellent motion brought forward by Councillor Jess David. The problem of river pollution is an urgent issue on many levels. We are fortunate to have an important river flowing through the centre of our city and on through North East Somerset. It is widely used for leisure and commuting, whether it be for boating, swimming, paddleboarding or canoeing, or as a life-affirming backdrop to walking, cycling or jogging. Councillor David has brought to our attention the January 2022 House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee report. It makes for very worrying reading, finding that a cocktail of sewage, agricultural waste and plastic is common in many English rivers. I'd like to draw your attention to an additional section which tackles the increasing evidence that sewage treatment works and the rivers they discharge into are becoming breeding grounds for antimicrobial resistance. The WHO has recognised for some time that antimicrobial resistance is one of the top 10 global health threats facing humanity. Misuse and overuse of antimicrobial drugs has led to multi-resistant pathogens against which we are running out of effective treatments. If you turn to the WHO website today, you will see a striking image of effluent discharge pipes. On March the 22nd this year, global experts called for action to reduce antimicrobial pollution, recognising this as critical to combat rising levels of drug resistance and protect the environment. Specifically, there is a call to action for all countries to improve management of antimicrobial containing waste in runoff from farms, hospitals and other sources and in sewage. Resistance developing in the water environment not only fuels the rise of drug-resistant superbugs, but also harms other organisms in the environment. I'd like to note here the lengthy discussions that Councillor David, together with our Deputy Leader for Climate Emergency, Sarah Warren, have already undertaken with Wessex Water around managing discharge from the existing antiquated sewage system. Whilst recognising the reality as a local authority that we do not have direct control over many of the factors that contribute to river pollution, most of the levers reside with the Environment Agency, we can nevertheless take a leadership role calling for improvements, scrutinising progress and making sure our activities on all levels take into account the aspirations of this motion. We as Lib Dems take this issue very seriously and this motion sets out our plans to do something about it. Residents would like to know about the quality of river water before embarking on leisure activities, and this should be available in real time. Finally, one area that we can take action on straight away is in raising awareness of behavioural changes we can all make immediately. 40% of pollution incidences are due to sewer blockages, and this is often due to wet wipes. Bin the Wipe campaigns have been very effective elsewhere, and communicating the wider message about only flushing the 3 Ps, pee, poo and paper is a task we should prioritise. From one motion to another, I commend to you this important blueprint for action to clean up our rivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge. I have Councillor Samuel, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I hope when it comes to the vote, all members in the council will support this motion. And here's some facts for you to dwell on. 14% of English rivers have a good ecological status. Water quality in England is the poorest in Europe, and improvements to water quality are flatlining because of 2 main sources of polluter: the water companies and the farming industry. Now, these were all quotes from the Environmental Audit Committee report that Councillor David referred to. In addressing that committee, Sir James Bevan, the chair of the Environment Agency, said, Current monitoring is outdated, underfunded, and inadequate. So there you have the background. The problem, and then ultimately the solution, is not just about the water industry or farmers. Both require different interventions. It's about the inherent structure of the management of wastewater in the UK. As you've heard, most foul water is combined with surface water and carried to treatment works before returning to the supply system. Only since the 1950s have new developments required the separation of these water sources, but most wastewater is carried in 19th century sewers, which are now not fit for purpose. One of the problems this creates at times of extreme weather events, sometimes increasing because of climate change. Remember those members who voted against the earlier report. They cannot cope with the volumes of water, and to prevent flood damage, the excess water, as we know, is discharged into our rivers and into the sea. 18,000 licenses are issued by the Environment Agency that sanction this practice, and it's doubtful that all of these are monitored effectively to ensure the permit holders comply with their conditions. The problem with agricultural discharges is first, they are weekly monitored, and second, that the type of pollutants being charged into rivers are highly toxic to human and animal life. Now remember, the water industry was privatized in 1989, and whilst this has led to considerable investment into water infrastructure, estimated 160 billion over the last 30 years, 17 billion was paid to shareholders as dividends, in other words, lost to the public purse forever. Cuts to the Environment Agency budgets made by governments in recent years have made it increasingly difficult for it to be effective. And this is not a problem of the Environment Agency's making. This is a political problem caused at government level by cutting the funds that are necessary. So let's remember that. But why should we be bothered about this? Well, there were 400,000 spills of sewage into rivers in 2020. I'll conclude by just reminding us, if anybody needs reminding, why it's important to us. I'll just finish this point and then I'll be there. We have 30 kilometers of a major river passing through our boundaries. It's a major environmental asset, providing recreational opportunities to residents, as well as forming an important background to the city of Bath, whose boundary lies within a meander of the river. We should all be concerned about this. This is not just an asset to be pumped full of sewage for private profit. Rivers are owned by all of us. They're not owned by the private sector or the government, and we must take action to clean them up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Chair, you're muted.
Councillor Waite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to come at this problem in a more personal way because I have had direct experience of river pollution. When I was young and fit and healthy, I used to teach at Culverhay School in Bath in the 80s and 90s. And there was a science technician there who, like a lot of non-teaching staff, was a real treasure. And he was very positive and very active in all sorts of ways. And he had a nice family. And his daughter in particular was a very keen swimmer, surfer, and diver. And it is with regret that I have to tell you that she was swimming off the coast near Weston-super-Mare one day, and she took a mouthful of untreated sewage, and after a short illness died. So there's been lots of talk today about how bad this is and how terrible it is. And I've seen somebody whose life has been completely devastated by pollution in rivers. He's a lovely man. He carried on. He got very involved in searches against sewage. And he used to come in quite regularly and tell us what he'd been doing to get our river pollutions down and get them cleaner. And at that time, there seemed to be quite a lot going on to actually achieve that. Now, I don't know if it's because of the blue flag system that the European Union brought in at that time, or whether it was because of privatization, as Richard said earlier. But the rivers seemed to be going in the right direction at that time. And when I read Councillor David's motion and I saw that we seem to be going back the other way, I found it really, really upsetting, because, you know, you hope in life that things get better and we learn more about how to behave and how to look after our environment. But sadly, that's not the case. There are places around here, as has already been said, where untreated sewage is going into our rivers. During the lockdown, a lot of people started doing wild swimming. And I really don't want to know or learn of another death in the River Avon or in the seas around our coasts, because we as a society have dropped the ball. Surface for Sewage is still going on. Actually, they've got an activity on the 23rd of April, starting at 6 o'clock at Worley Weir, to protest against the activities of South West Water. So please take this motion seriously. It's very, very important and it affects people directly. I support this motion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Waite. Councillor Warren, please.
I'd like to thank Councillor David for bringing forward this item, which is so important both for health, as we've heard, and our biodiversity, which is in crisis. I would like to note the excellent working relationship of the Council with Wessex Water and thank Wessex staff members, Matt Wilden and Ruth Barden, for their time and support in putting together this evening's motion. They've been generous with their time in explaining this complex area, which demands action from a large number of parties, in addition to the water companies. We look forward to further constructive joint working with the company, particularly around communications with the public on matters concerning disposal of waste of different types. Also, on the rollout of a sustainable urban drainage, which I'm pleased to say that the Council has been able to incorporate in some of our recent developments, such as Bath Quays, which we must have an aspiration to roll out more widely to existing as well as to new developments. I'm very pleased to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hedges, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I support the motion. I just want to bring something else to the table. It didn't occur to me until today, and I do apologise to Jess, so I would have told her beforehand. But when I was fit before I got my problems, I used to be an average fisherman. And point one is I was absolutely disgusted by the amount of line and hooks and God knows what else was left on the banks. And I used to bring as much of it home as I possibly could. But the thing that used to really rattle my cage was private boats, leisure boats, and emptying raw waste into the river. I saw it on a number of occasions while I was fishing, because I know that there's supposed to be stations where they empty the waste, but some just don't bother. They just empty it straight into the river. So I agree 100% with Jesse's motion, but there's a lot of other things we could do besides just the waste to protect the wildlife, like picking up the fishing line or fining people for leaving it behind, fining people for emptying raw waste into the river, and the rubbish that gets chucked overboard on some of these party boats is unbelievable. So I support the motion, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hedges. Councillor Player, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I very much support this motion, and in fact involved on Saturday's event picking along the towpath, as I say, on Saturday at Green Park Station, and the Saints was there. And if anybody wants to join me, please contact me so that I can give you details about it. It's very, very important, and I just love seeing the wildlife down by the riverside. And at the moment I see at least 17 swans down there, and that's why I want it to go. I want it to go that way and not see death, destruction and misery, because we're just not bothering enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blair. Councillor Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Green Party has for many years had policies in place with regard to protecting our landscape in all its forms, and publicly states, only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been poisoned, only after the last fish has been caught, only then you will find that money cannot be eaten. Data clearly shows that every single one of the rivers, lakes and streams that has been monitored in England is now polluted. The Green Party supports this Liberal Democrat motion. We are cognizant that this motion is led by the National Liberal Democrat Party, who are chasing the blue vote. Many Tory voters are aghast that privatised water companies are discharging raw sewage into our rivers. Dirty rivers are electorally toxic for the Conservative government, a government who recently rejected an amendment to the Environment Bill, which would have curbed waste discharge into English rivers and streams. So who in the main is dumping sewage into rivers? It is clear that planning permission for industrial livestock units is allowing extra excrement into our water systems. Local authorities are granting these planning permissions and the Environment Agency is issuing environmental permits. In many cases, no environmental decisions are made at all because a high threshold is required for planning permission for industrial livestock. Permission is not needed for use units of less than 40,000 chickens. Now that's a great deal of bird poo. This is regulatory failure. Cleaning up our rivers is important for public health and requires the involvement of many, including water companies, farmers, landowners, developers, businesses, and local councils. It recently came to my attention that a water source on the canal in Bathwick Ward has not been fit for drinking since 2012. Baines Council has been aware of this issue since 2012. A public protection officer informed the Canal and River Trust of the presence of pathogenic bacteria indicating facial contamination.
1 minute
Yet
remains.
after 10 years, the health of residents has still not been made secure. It states on the Baines website that the council is a member of the Bristol Avon Catchment Partnership, which includes Wessex Water, the Environment Agency and Wiltshire Council, and is working closely with partners to identify and deliver collaborative solutions to improve water quality and improve the water environment for people and wildlife. Further, that the council has a role to play in educating and raising awareness of the many individual behaviour changes that citizens can make to lessen their impact on water pollution and harm to the water environment. The Green Party will be supporting this motion in the hope that it is more than lip service to chasing Tory voters, that this Liberal Democrat Council act now to put in place safe drinking water to support public health for local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. There are no other speakers and therefore I return to Councillor David to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the speakers for your support for the motion this evening. I'd like to reassure Councillor Wright that this is not at all lip service. I wrote every word of the motion myself and it's something that I feel very strongly about, and I hope it's something that we can all reach cross-party agreement on. There are some clear priorities for us to address as a council. Firstly, obtaining better data for our residents so that we can all understand the quality of the river. Secondly, playing our part to divert more rainwater away from the sewage system, so to increase capacity. And thirdly, to work with community groups to clean up the litter that's blighting the riversides. So I hope you can all support this motion and give us a clear mandate as a council to demand more for our local river catchment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. First of all, can I have any votes against supporting this motion, please? Can I have any abstentions to supporting this motion, please? No, then this motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to agenda item 14, a motion on Ukrainian refugees, and councillors will have received an updated agreed motion in the middle of this afternoon. So can I ask Councillor Moss to move the recommendation on behalf of all group leaders? Councillor Moss.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm sure you're aware that one of the amendments was unintentionally, it was put in the name of the Labour group to start with. That was never the intention. It was always to be moved, I think, hopefully on behalf of all of us, all political groups and non-aligned councillors. I'm sure that all of us have been really shocked and upset with the recent events, the recent scenes in Ukraine over the last month. And I'm sure equally we've been overwhelmed with the response from our friends, from our neighbours, from our constituents, who seem to be all saying, what can we do to help? And that help, and those offers of help have taken many forms. Money being donated, people driving essential supplies across Europe to the borders and into Ukraine itself, people offering space in their homes to accommodate refugees. And even a day or so ago, I was talking to our local GP practice who are preparing to welcome, if that's the right word, many traumatized families and individuals. And as a council and as councillors, we do have a responsibility of community leadership to reflect the wishes of our residents who wish to help and welcome refugees, to coordinate how that happens safely. And I emphasise the word safely because sadly, we must recognise here that there are despicable people around who wish to exploit this situation and who wish to exploit refugees. And we also look to deliver services for refugees when they do arrive in Baines, because Baines does have a proud track record of being a place of sanctuary. I think most recently the support given to Syrian refugees, and that was under the last administration led by Tim Warren. That's just a few years ago, and I think that's quite rightly a matter of pride for us all. And what this motion does is try to recognise the scale of the crisis, but also the goodwill and offers of support from our residents. And again, Baines' important role as a partner, as a coordinator, and a provider of services for vulnerable and traumatised people. I'm confident, I'm very hopeful and confident that Council will not only support this motion, but as a Council, we will step up to our responsibility as a place of welcome and a place of sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Guy, I believe you'd like to second this. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Robin, for moving the motion on behalf of all group leaders. I hope that this is an indication that all in the chamber will support this motion, that we all stand with Ukraine and will collectively and individually do what we can to help Ukrainian refugees, as well as all others seeking sanctuary in this, their darkest of days. I note the changes in this motion, which reflect the changes as this crisis has developed and the needs of the Ukrainian people have become clearer. I hope the government will continue to reflect on what is needed and will adapt the current scheme accordingly to make it easier for Ukrainians to flee the war to a place of safety with us here in Bath and North Sea Somerset. I know council officers are already starting work with the checks that will be required to make sure that safeguarding measures are in place, and I would urge government to, as soon as possible, bring forward more guidance on the Homes for Ukraine schemes, so that actually our council officers and all our partners know exactly what is being asked for. Not everyone can provide a home, nor even a room, but I would like to remind all that donations to the organisations working on the ground, in particular in Poland, such as the Red Cross, UNICEF, and the Disaster Emergency Committee, would welcome any donations. More locally, charities including Bath Welcomes Refugees and Julian House, I am sure, would also welcome cash donations so they can help and support Ukrainian refugees as they arrive, and of course continue the work they already do with Afghan, Syrian and all other refugees and asylum seekers. I am sure many will want to speak, so I'm happy to end my speech and hear from you all, and I'm very happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. Can I ask Councillor Evans, please? Councillor Evans? Seems to have lost, we lost Councillor Evans for the moment. We'll move on to Councillor Hale, please.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this motion and the recommendation to write to the Prime Minister and Home Secretary, asserting our desire at a local level to do as much as we possibly can to help refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. Sadly, European wars are not relics of history. Any nation could at any time suffer devastating cruelty at the hands of a foreign military. Under such circumstances, we all have a moral duty to help innocent civilians fleeing conflict. And I commend the efforts at a local and national level to ensure we are a safe haven for those who need one. Indeed, the level of support shown to refugees locally is commendable, and I would like to add my voice to those thanking people for their efforts. Just to conclude, just to take advantage, today we have launched, when I say we, that's myself and a retired hospital chaplain, Chris Roberts, who used to be at the RUH, now lives just outside of Sheffield. He's come up with the idea of sunflowers for Ukraine. Many will know that the sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine. And Chris's idea is that as many people as possible display an image or a real sunflower or a photograph in their window to, one, show the sort of overwhelming support for Ukraine, but also when the souls that are being rescued come over here, when they're about moving around, they will see that support as well. And it's the aim is also that they will be displayed by people who are probably willing to help those who have taken a family in, but they themselves perhaps aren't in that position. So, as I say, it's launched today. Hopefully we're going to be talking about it on Radio Bristol on Sunday morning, ridiculously early, but there we go. And if any of you feel that you can just, I mean, I have a photograph stuck in the front bedroom window of a sunflower. We'll all remember the rainbows during the pandemic that were appearing in people's windows. Let's do the same with the sunflowers and bring that little bit of sunshine into the lives of those who are coming here for refuge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hale. Councillor Evans, are you there? No, clearly. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support this motion tonight, and I wish to thank the Labour Group for tabling it. We have a moral duty to give safe sanctuary to people fleeing war, and the proposal laid out in this motion, namely, to write to the government stating this council's willingness to welcome refugees, is most welcome. Over the course of the last century, the European continent has been ravaged by conflict, and the current war in Ukraine serves as a reminder that nations and their populations can still, even now, be subjected to unimaginable acts of aggression. We must stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian people. Encouragingly, residents of Bath and North East Somerset have done precisely that. As of last week, more than 30 people had contacted council offering accommodation for Ukrainian refugees, families fleeing the war. So I can only imagine that that number has since increased. I'd like to thank members of the public for their kindness and generosity, and I remain hopeful that the peace will return to Ukraine soon. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. And I see now that Councillor Evans has returned. He obviously had some access difficulties. Councillor Evans.
I did. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The scenes we are seeing in Ukraine on a daily basis remind us of how privileged we are to live in a country free from conflict. And I support this motion and commend fellow members for your contributions on this overwhelmingly important issue. Putin's outrageous and unprovoked aggression has already created an enormous humanitarian crisis. And as the motion states, we must continue to play our part in resolving that crisis. Making donations and offering to open their houses to refugees, the people of Bath and North East Somerset are showing how generous they can be, and I would like to add my voice to express respect for them and say thank you to them for everything they are doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Guy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to give my full support behind this Labour motion. It's really, really important that we, as a group and as a council, thank everybody in Bath and North East Somerset for stepping forward in these dark times. And as the lead of the council, I'd just like to state that I'll be making contact with the Ukrainian ambassador shortly, stating that Bath and North East Somerset's arms are open and welcome every single refugee that we can take from Ukraine. And I'll be passing it on to the ambassador myself. As a student of international politics, it's unfortunately quite obvious to me that this situation is only going to get worse. You may have seen today that NATO have dispatched a further 40,000 troops to Eastern Europe. I think that number will go up and continue to go up. That will mean that Western nations will spend more on defence and security. And if governments have to spend more on defence and security, that means they have less money to give to the very important topics that we've been discussing today. So local councils and local authorities will probably have to expect to receive less from central government because of these awful actions. And the council and people of Bath and North East Somerset should be aware of that. Unfortunately, things are going to get worse before they get better. And that's why I fully support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. My heart cries and bursts when I see the videos posted on social media from my very, very good and close friend, Rakesh Shankar Bharati, who is a writer, married to a beautiful Ukrainian lady and has 2 sweet daughters. 8 hours ago, he sent a video directly from the eastern part of Ukraine. And despite many pleas and advices from me and our friends to leave the country, he's saying, no, I and our family will fight till the last blood in our body. He's courageous, much more courageous than me, but that gives me also the courage to fight against abhorrent action by a state or by any individual. Obviously, it was great to see Ukrainian flag in lights, not really flag, but through the light on our ABs. And there's no need even to say that we strongly condemn the abhorrent action of Putin's draconian, belligerent, hostile, and perhaps mad Putin. Ukraine,
1 minute remains.
Is the biggest state in Europe, a sovereign country, as far as area is concerned. And this violation of their territory and deadly attacks on their citizens is an outrage. It was good to participate in demonstrations in front of abbeys twice, where students from my university participated. They were not only Ukrainian, but some of my colleagues who are from Russia. And it was heartening to see that my Russian colleague participated in a demonstration against an attack by his own country on Ukraine. It is deeply distressing time, and we should do as much as we can Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have all seen the devastation caused by Putin's unnecessary aggression in Ukraine with absolute horror. So I welcome this motion completely. It has really been amazing to see the outpouring of support for the people of Ukraine by residents across Bath and North East Somerset. But I just wanted to highlight some of the amazing work that's been happening in my ward of Poulton, where a group of community activists have managed to raise £15,000 for the DEC in the last 2 weeks, and where a local dog groomer has cancelled her holiday to Rome to travel with donations to the border, the Poland-Ukrainian border, and at the same time raising a further £20,000 for animal and human welfare to support the DEC and a charity called Dog Bus. It is always humbling when people come together in the way that we've seen in the local communities we all represent, and it is a shame that we're having to bring motions like this to council and to see the devastation unfold on our TV screens. But I absolutely support this motion 100%, and I won't say any more.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And Councillor Watt, please.
Thank you, Chair. As a former soldier, when I had a bit more hair and a slightly thinner waist, I have seen active service and know something of the experience of the Ukrainian soldiers and what they are thinking and feeling right now. But I was not fighting in my hometown. I was fighting in other lands, and my family was safe at home. So I didn't have to worry about them. I could just focus on my mission. And it's easy to see or imagine right now that we're powerless and to act as we witness the destructive power of Putin and the Russian regime's ambitions. But we are not powerless. We can act now, both collectively in this chamber and as individuals, to provide safe haven for as many Ukrainian families as we can accommodate. And every single family that we provide a safe haven for enables a brave Ukrainian soldier to defend his lands and his liberty, his or her lands and their liberty, and their right to self-determination, in the knowledge that their family is safe. And I can assure anybody who is listening to this that that will make an enormous contribution to the Ukrainian soldier who is faced with an aggressive Russian attack and an absolute need to finish this on Ukrainian soil. We must all want this to end in Ukraine.
1 minute remains.
The most likely way that Putin will be removed from his position in Russia is if Ukraine, with the support of the entire world, stops him in Ukraine, sends him home. That will, I am sure, in the end, expose the idiocy to the Russian people, who will rise up and rid the world of Putin. And that is why we must accommodate every single Ukrainian family that we can to enable those Ukrainian soldiers to fight, defend, and end this in Ukraine.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. I call on, there are no more speakers, so I call on Councillor Moss to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, Thank you to all councillors for their comments, their thoughts, their reflections and their support. And in anticipating, thank you for council for support for this motion. But I think the biggest thanks has to go out to our fellow citizens for the support, for the help, and the outpouring of grief for what is going on in Ukraine and their need to do something to help that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Is there anybody who wishes to vote against this motion? Is there anyone who wishes to abstain from the motion? I think we are all unanimous in supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now come to item 15, a statement by Councillor Hounsell. Councillor Hounsell, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Now to a more mundane matter. We all believe in fairness. I want to bring your attention to what I regard as unfairness regarding visitor accommodation policies and practice locally and nationally. Visitor accommodation is covered in policy RE7 of the Baines placemaking plan. It states that a change of use from a dwelling to visitor accommodation will be permitted, provided that for large residential properties, a substantial private residential unit is retained. The reason for that policy is obvious. The owner living in the property will have a personal interest in maintaining good order and good relationships with neighbours. If a good citizen applies for planning permission in advance for such a change of use of a property they own but do not live in, they will be refused because of our policy RE7. However, if an owner of a large property ignores the planning process and goes ahead to change the use from residential to visitor accommodation, the onus then falls on neighbours to demonstrate that a fundamental change of use has taken place. Neighbours have to maintain logs of incidents such as increased noise and nuisance, traffic generation, impact on the character of an area, etc. The minimum period for maintaining such logs is said to be 6 months. Neighbours can be advised to take photos, video recordings, use noise monitoring equipment, all dated and timed, and so on. A key consideration is whether the visitors are family groups treating the house as one would expect a normal house to be treated, or groups enjoying hen and stag parties and the like. There will be neighbours who may feel intimidated and neighbours who lack the capacity or strength to undertake the required surveillance. There are cases where neighbours have had to complete and submit monitoring forms to the council for years before enforcement action is considered and taken. This enforcement action usually entails forcing the owner to make a formal planning application, which can then take months to conclude.
1 minute remains.
And if the application is refused, the owner can appeal, adding yet more months of anguish to neighbours while the owner is making sizable sums of money. Our local policies need redrafting in the next local plan. A simple test for a private residential unit could be where the owner is registered for council tax, for example. Change of use to visitor accommodation for large properties should require a planning application at the outset in every case, giving the local community and local councils a chance to have their say. Our planning enforcement team does very good work. They need the right tools, more officers, more resources, and stronger, unambiguous policies. National law needs to be enacted that requires all Airbnb type accommodation to be registered with the local authority. A levy on every booking should be paid to the local authority to give the funds necessary for effective monitoring and control. These changes will be welcomed by those who good owners who offer visitor accommodation, who want to do the right thing, but are tainted by the publicity from the bad cases. At its worst, these party houses blight people's lives for months and years, affecting health and well-being. Neighbours, communities feel powerless. This has to stop. It is simply not fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. Councillor Guy, do you have any factual questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hounsell, for that. I do have a factual question. How many large properties are being used at the moment for Airbnb in North and East Somerset?
Right. I believe that there are about 100 such properties in Bath that sleep 10 or more people. I don't have the number for North East Somerset. And of course, the reason for that is there isn't a registration scheme. Every house like this is a house that's no longer available in our residential housing stock.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, do you have a factual question?
No factual questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Duncan, but no factual questions.
Thank you. Councillor Moss, I see Councillor Hardman has wished to speak on this. Do you wish to defer your factual question to her? Councillor Moss?
He's muted. You're muted.
Sorry, yes, I do.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Defer to Councillor Hardman, yep.
Thank you, Councillor Hardman. Thank you for Councillor Hardman. Councillor Hansel, sorry, what a slip. Many thanks for the comments you have made, but were you aware that a motion on short lets was put forward by the Labour group and amendments from the Lib Dems and Conservatives were accepted, so it had full cross-party support? This was passed on the 12th of July 2018. If not, maybe you should revisit this motion to move your statement forward. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you for making me aware of that. What I want to happen is that we all support change in the new local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, there being no other business, I wish you good night. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I will see the quorum at formal council tomorrow at 11 a.m.